Hello, everyone. It is Jennie and Laurie, and we're here today to talk about the Cancer full moon, which is happening on January 13th at 5:26 p.m. That's Eastern time. And let's see if you're new with us. Let me just introduce us. Jennie is from Hidden Path Astrology. You can find her there at hiddenpathastrology.com. All the links are below for all our social media. My name's Laurie Farrington from lauriefarrington.com, and you can find me there. You can find all the links below. So I guess we should just kind of jump into it, but let's see, is there anything? You've got a few local events going on, right, Jennie?
Yeah, I have a couple local workshops that are still going on over the next couple months. And also, I'm continuing to make those short answer videos that are on this channel. So that's the other thing I just hoping people will take a look at. And I'm just going to keep going with those. And please send me any questions. If you have like a kind of a simple astrology question that you've never quite understood, like send me a question. My information's in the links below. So
Yeah.
that'd be awesome. Yeah, and more stuff coming up, but
Yeah.
not quite yet.
And Jennie also does the monthly meditation videos that I know people like a lot. So there's a
Excellent.
lot of ways you can absorb our content. And my book just came out as well. I have to bring that up. How to Read and Interpret a Birth Chart Guidepost for Understanding Natal Astrology. Today is actually the release date, which is January 8th. So pick up that book at your local stores or online. If you happen to want a signed book delivered straight from me to you, just send me a private message and I can arrange that for you. So now let's talk about this full moon.
Let's talk about it. All right. Well, we just want to mention that a full moon is something that we all kind of pay attention to. Like, ooh, it's a full moon. You know, you can go out, and if it's not cloudy, you can see it. But the thing is it's the midpoint of a cycle. And one of the cool things about the moon phase cycle, well, there's a couple cool things about it. I mean, first of all, it's something you can see. So, you know, you don't see the moon, and then all of a sudden you see a week goes by and you see a waxing half moon, and you can really, it's very distinct in the sky. You're like, ooh, what's that? That's the first part of the cycle. It's very actionable, time to do something. Then you get to the full moon, and the full moon is really just like this big spotlight. It shines a light on whatever it is that you've been working on for the first half of the cycle. And then it goes down the other side. So then you have the waning half moon, where it's time to start letting go of that cycle. And then it comes back around to the new moon again. So the whole thing, in and of itself, is about a month long. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can use that same template of cycles in multiple ways in astrology. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's the basis of all of the transit cycles. It's the basis for even like some of the more abstract woo-woo progressions and other timing techniques astrologers use. But the point is that it's not just the phases of the moon, which is awesome in itself, but it's the idea that it's laying the foundation for the way that the planetary bodies relate to each other. So it's really speaking about relationship, and if nothing else, that is what life is about relationship and relating. And the cycles really show you, well, how do you relate? What's going on? You know, what are some of the questions that might be raised at different points in your life? So that I just want to mention that Lori and I are going to make a few like upcoming cycle videos. So I just want to tell you we're doing this, and it's one of the most awesome and fun things about astrology. And I know that when I was studying with you, Lori, you're definitely the first person who were like, hey, these are cycles. And how exciting that is when you start realizing that something you're going through now had an origin point or has an ending point or has some cyclical way of appearing in your life. It's super empowering. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited to do those videos about cycles with you because cycles, the lunar cycle, like you said, it's a template for all the pairs of any pair of planets has a similar, fits into that template of the same cycle. So it is fascinating, and we will be doing more with that in the
Nice.
coming months.
Yeah. Well, so meantime, why don't we talk about the fact that it's a Cancer full moon. What does that bring up for you?
Oh, Cancer. Cancer's such an interesting sign because it's a water sign, which means it's incredibly sensitive. It's deep, it's sensitive. And yet it's a cardinal sign. So it is a sign that gets things done, that makes things happen. So it's a very, very strong, sensitive sign. And in our culture, we are somehow taught that sensitivity is not strong. And Cancer is a sign that shows us very clearly that that is not true. And I think that's one of the things I want people to understand about Cancer more than anything is how strong it is. It is the sign that's ruled by the moon. So it's got a lot to do with how we nurture, how we care for, how we, you think about the moon, you think of mothering. And if you think about, a mother of any species, a mother bear, and think of her being put in a position where she has to protect her young, you can see very clearly just in that simple example the strength of Cancer. Cancer is a very powerful sign.
Yeah. I mean, anyone with a strong Cancer proponent is going to constantly be doing that dance around when to be vulnerable and wide open and tender and nurturing and caring, and
Mhm.
when to be protective and defending and fierce. And there's always that interplay
Yes.
with Cancer. And I think you're right. Like, it's totally one of those signs that people are like, oh, Cancer's so sweet. It's like, well, yeah, it's got a piece of that, but man, it can be totally not sweet and actually devastatingly powerful in
Yeah.
other ways. So yeah, I agree with you about about Cancer. I also think the sensitivity of it, think about a mother's intuition.
Mm.
So and not that you have to be a mother or even identify with a mother archetype at all, but that idea of being so sensitive that you know when one of your young has gone too close to the busy road. Like, you just know. So it really has a very strong intuitive component. And I think part of the problem in our culture is that we've been taught to kind of turn away from that. And our intuition is so important and so powerful. And I also think it's ancient, and it's part of our reality as a human being, and part of what we're doing right now in this crazy paradigm of what we're all seeing in the culture right now is getting in touch with our intuition and learning how to listen to ourselves and learning how to listen to it. And I think Cancer really brings that in. And today we're only talking about a full moon. So it's just a moment in time. This isn't a big video about Cancer, but I just well, we wanted to mention those little pieces about it. But Cancer full moon really brings emotions to the surface.
Mhm.
And it's a really important time to look at your own feelings and and possibly your own reactivity or the things that you feel really strongly about. And you'll see more of why in a moment.
And the other thing, just to mention here at the start is, yeah, find where Cancer is in your chart. I mean, we will go over the individual rising signs, but even as we're talking here, and look at that area, wherever Cancer is in your chart, is where you are deeply sensitive and very fierce. And I love that you brought up the word fierce for Cancer. I have a daughter who has a strong Cancerian component. She has her sun in Cancer, and I learned a lot about Cancer from her because she is incredibly sensitive and incredibly fierce when necessary. It's
Nice.
a powerful sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and you reminded me, Lori, what we haven't talked yet about is the polarity. And I know we've gotten some feedback from people here and there that people like to hear about the polarities, and I think they're cool to talk about. And what the polarity is the simple fact that the sun is in Capricorn, so we're in Capricorn season. We've made a video about that. Watch it if you haven't already. And now at this full moon, that's the polarity. Exactly opposite the Capricorn sun, you have the Cancer moon. So that really brings in the topics of Capricorn and Cancer. And what they have in common is they're both yin signs because Capricorn's an earth sign, and Cancer is a water sign. And actually, I think people sometimes get surprised to hear that Capricorn is a yin sign because they think it's I mean, it is assertive, it's cardinal, but it is yin, and it does refer to the internal component, the need to get in alignment with your own integrity. So the Cancer full moon kind of brings in this moment of time of like checking. how in alignment your emotions are with your responsibilities and your integrity and your ability. Like, are you holding yourself accountable not just to your actions but also to your feelings? Are you lining up with your feelings? Do you know what those are? Do you know how those are interacting with whatever you're doing in your life that you're trying to be very serious about during Capricorn season?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, the polarities are really important. And I remember early when I was first beginning studying astrology, I didn't really realize, how that worked. It's hard for me to think about how little I knew at one time about this stuff. But just, during Capricorn season, when there's a full moon, it's going to be a Cancer full moon. It's not like an Aries full moon can show up in Capricorn season, right?
Oh, I know. I remember learning that too. And it's like, oh, cool. Like it
Yeah,
just makes sense. And,
yeah,
the sun's
yeah.
on one side of the earth and the moon's on the other. And it's
Right. So it's
cool.
got to be in polarity. So every Capricorn season, the full moon is going to be a Cancer full moon. So,
Yeah.
oh,
So,
the other thing, I don't know if now is when we want to bring this up, but the full moon relates back to the new moon as far as the cycles go.
oh, yeah.
So this full moon relates back to the new moon that was, when was that?
Well, there was a Capricorn new moon on December 30th. So
Okay.
you probably know where you were for that one because it was right before New Year's Eve. And then the longer cycle, you would look for the Cancer new moon, which was on July 5th, earlier this year. And
During
they're,
Cancer season.
yeah, yeah. And those are sometimes like the bigger cycles, speaking of cycles, are often more meaningful because our lives don't happen in necessarily in 4 week increments, right? I mean, sometimes they do. My life recently has operated in a 4 week increment when things are a little crazy or whatever. But the longer cycles usually give us more information about our personal growth and so on and so forth. So yeah,
Okay. Do you want to open up the chart now?
yes, do it.
All right, let's take a look at what the chart itself looks like. So here we have January 13th, 5:26 p.m. in Eastern Time. And what we're looking at is here is the moon, and it is in opposition to the sun. Now, what do we notice right away? There's a few things that come right to the surface right away. First is the fact that Mars is closely involved. That's the
Mhm.
first thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just very blatant. And Mars is retrograde right now.
Yes.
We're in the middle of actually January 15th is the midpoint of the Mars retrograde cycle. So that means we're almost halfway through Mars looking like it's going backwards in the sky to us. And we made a video about that. So do check that out. But in a nutshell, Mars is used to directing its energy outwards. And when it's retrograde, it's forced to turn that energy inwards. And so a lot of times astrologers talk about Mars retrograde as like there being a lot of aggravation, frustration, or reactivity because energy that normally wants to go out is being forced inwards. But it's, yeah, you can look at it like that, but it's also a great opportunity to understand more about yourself, particularly in Cancer, in the moon sign.
Mhm.
And at this full moon, that's what's showing up. It's this moment in time that reveals what Mars is doing in your chart right now. So ask yourself, are you frustrated or annoyed about something? Are you angry on one hand? On the other hand, you might be, are you excited? Is there something that you're really ready to act on and that you're ready to do it and you know yourself well enough to do it? So that's one of the fundamental questions, I think.
Yeah. There's a lot of other things that are coming into play with this as well. And a few of them that we want to point to is there is a sextile aspect to Uranus, right? And there is what else have we got?
A trine to Neptune.
Trine to Neptune.
And honestly, Pluto is a little bit, it's not opposed the moon, but it is still opposed Mars. Um, I think that
Yeah,
aspects, I don't think it consider that as strong just because
because
if
it's out
Moon
of
and
sun.
Mars are in Leo, yeah, but I still think
But
it's
what, I feel like Pluto is part of this story, though, very clearly to me, not necessarily by aspect, but just by the fact that in what, like 8 or 9 days, the sun is going to conjunct that Pluto.
Yeah,
And in 8 or 9 days is January 21st, which is a significant time in our country's process.
there is.
Right.
Um,
Um, yeah, I
and
think,
speaking of cycles that we brought up, that's the beginning of a whole new cycle, a
right.
year-long cycle.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That is, the equivalent to a new moon when two planets come together. So yeah, and we're going way off from this Cancer full moon video, but at any rate,
that's
on
okay.
the 21st, a new cycle starts of really illumination of power
Yeah,
is what I would say. That's a big cycle starting there that we're going to be paying attention to.
yeah. I mean, I think in a nutshell, when you have the moon, which moves so quickly and is such a personal planet or a personal symbol in the chart, and it's got these contexts to these outer planets, yet it's this personal thing. So there's something in this picture about the changes that are way bigger than each of us individually, that are changing in the culture, and having to deal with those on an individual level. How are they impacting your very private emotional world now, and because there's a trine and a sextile though to Neptune and Uranus, there I feel like there's a little bit more of a gentleness to it, like a hey, you need to work on accepting this, or a little more of a wake up rather than shouting in your face, like just a little more like, and also it what it does is it's sort of like a little bit gentler of a nudge, but it also is saying to hey, here's an invitation to deal with the reactivity of Moon conjunct Mars. And what that invitation is really to look at the bigger picture, the much bigger picture,
Much
the
better.
understanding things need to change. Like the way that we are living on this planet right now is not in balance. And, there is change is necessary. I'm not saying it's going to be easy or fun or whatever, but this change that is beyond our individual lifetimes that serve as a source of support, that serve as a source of an understanding of what it means to be human. I know this might be getting into like more like spiritual ways of viewing things or whatever, but nonetheless, helpful and can really support your process rather than feeling frustrated and aggravated and whatever else that could happen. There's an invitation here.
Yeah, I think that's really great how you've talked about that. When we look at this and the planets that are involved are these outer planets, yeah, we need to really expand our view. And rather than getting stuck in the frustration of Mars being retrograde, saying, I can't do anything about things that aren't the way I want them to be. There's that frustration. Mars wants to do something and it's kind of turned inward. It can't really do what it thinks it ought to do. And yet, yeah, we need to be looking at the way bigger picture. These cycles of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are huge, and they are way beyond our lifetime and our little concerns.
Yeah. And as a final kind of comment, please do remember a full moon is just a very quick moment in time. So I really do like thinking of it as an invitation to like, how do you want to spend this quick moment in time on, next Monday, wherever you live in the world, like to, change the time to whatever that is. But just think about that. How do you want to handle your own emotions and feelings? And allow yourself to feel galvanized and moving towards something rather than stirring in a stew of whatever anger and
Right.
frustration. I mean, and if you do feel angry and frustrated, fine, that's fine. We all have those. That's part of being human. But you don't have to let it drag you into the depths of things. You can use it to be like, well, what do I want to take action on today
Right.
that will work with my feelings?
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
this moment in time, how you respond to this moment in time will determine the next moments in time. So,
mhm.
yeah, from this moment in time, what are you going to do with that frustration? How are you going to allow? And Uranus is the one that we've focused on when we get into the individual impacts. How are you going to allow big change to excite you to take actions without getting just bowled over by your frustration?
That's right. While maintaining the integrity of your feelings. you know.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Okay, are we ready to just go into the individual ones?
Yes, indeed.
Wow, we went through that quickly. Okay, let me get rid of all those lines. We're gonna move to folks with Aries rising. Okay, if you have Aries rising, this full moon is falling in your fourth house where you have Cancer. And, this is the house that really relates to your family, your home, your ancestral line. So there's a lot of sensitivity here, and there may be at this point in time, this moment of this full moon, you may be feeling a certain amount of frustration or desire to have things be different, agitation toward family members or toward your ancestral line, those damn ancestors, they messed everything up for you. There may be some frustration with your basement flooding or whatever it may be. Oh, basement flooding. That made me think of someone I know who had a recent basement flood. At any rate, this frustration in that area really asks you at this full moon to kind of pull back from that and consider the seriousness of the season. We are in Capricorn season, the seriousness of how you spend your time out in the world as far as your career or your social reputation. It really is asking you to be clear and make sure that you're in integrity in that area, and that will help support any agitation that you might be feeling. The other thing, we've added Uranus here, and Uranus is sitting there in your second house. This tells us Uranus has been in your second house for quite some time. There's been a lot of big shifting changes for you over the last couple of years around your how you understand your own self-worth. And that can involve your money, your resources, or just, yeah, your self-esteem. How has how have those changes enabled you to, it's like there's an opportunity coming from those changes that allows you to work with any frustration you might be feeling with your home and family and turn that into an action that you take.
Hmm.
Maybe you can afford to fix that basement flood zone. I don't know.
Yeah. I was just thinking with this one, like with Aries rising, it just sort of suggests that during this Cancer full moon, it's like all you want to do is nest and like be at home and be cozy. But there's a feather poking you in the nest. There's as Laurie said, some sort of irritation or frustration or something that's more energized than you would like it to be in this very private place. And there is a suggestion that because we're in Capricorn season and this full moon is happening on a Monday, that it might be very helpful just whatever your work is. Maybe you're at work and that's where you can kind of lean into the Capricorn piece of this and lean into, just as Lori said, the integrity of that. But that's the interplay, thinking about that polarity between your home life and your work life and how are those working together for you today and how can they support each other? How does one support the other? And that's just what kind of came to my mind while you're
Yeah.
shelling out all the money that Uranus suggests.
Yeah. Yeah. So, something about your self-worth is enabling you to work with it differently. So that's awesome. Okay, let's move on to folks who have Taurus rising.
Okay, so those of you with Taurus rising, this Cancer full moon is landing in your third house. And, the third house is one of my favorite houses, I think, because it really represents, I guess if I had to pick one word, it's your voice. It's how you communicate, it's how you engage with your siblings. Your siblings are certainly a place where you have to learn to develop your voice. It's one point or another. The third house also refers to your neighborhood, your neighbors. And for those of you with Taurus rising, this is a very sensitive place. So I imagine there being a lot of sensitivity around communication in general, like the way you share your feelings and the way that you are able to be in conversation with other people as they share their feelings. So there's a lot of things about that And right now, with Mars right next to the full moon, there's definitely a suggestion that this is could be not very comfortable right now. This could be feeling very annoyed or frustrated about something. It could be feeling the target of somebody else's annoyance or frustration. And if that's the case, just tune into that and recognize that, because it also may be something that's inspiring you to take an action that you previously haven't been able to. I mean, maybe it's time to share, to share your feelings with a sibling. I mean, maybe that could be it, and it's just time. And Mars is saying you've got to do it now. So kind of, check in with yourself. Where do you fall on that kind of spectrum of things with the Moon Mars conjunction? And then also fold into the whole picture the fact that it's Capricorn season. What have you been working on to do with your world perspective and your education and your learning? Have you been disciplined about what you need to do here, or are you taking responsibility for your worldview? Those are things that play into this, and it might actually help lift you out of that very personal back and forth, sensitivity you're feeling down in the third house. It could help you lift into that bigger perspective, and be there and hold that. So that's good. The other thing that we've brought in here is Uranus. Uranus has been going through your first house for a long time, creating big ripples and changes. And, your identity has changed. I mean, there's a fundamental shift going on for you here. And that's actually an opportunity with whatever this thing is at the full moon, where you feel kind of about something you want to communicate. It's sort of saying, well, maybe there's a new you and you're ready to share your feelings about that new you, but nonetheless, embracing that change in the first house through Uranus is going to be really helpful. So,
I really like this. I think of, I mean, you just said everything, but just this new sense of self and how in this full moon, you are really given this opportunity to express how much you've changed and holding the integrity of your worldview and using this new sense of self to speak up for yourself. It's really
yeah.
lovely. I like that
Mhm.
one a lot. Okay, we're going to move on to folks who have Gemini rising. With Gemini rising, this full moon, this very sensitive Cancer full moon, is falling in your second house. The second house is the area of the chart that really speaks to how we value ourselves, our own understanding of money and resources, what we have, how we use what we have. Um, People with Gemini rising have a lot of sensitivity around their possessions and a lot of sensitivity around what their possessions mean about who they are. And at this full moon, at this moment in time with this Mars retrograde right tied in there, there's some sense of frustration. Maybe I could make up all kinds of stories here, but there's some frustration, and it may involve what your income is or what your possessions are or are not. But there's something in your self-worth that is feeling a certain amount of anxiety. Now, in order to, you don't have to get stuck in anxiety, and you might not even be feeling it that way, but there is a likelihood that that could be the way you're feeling it. At any rate, one of the ways to work with this is, first of all, think about the fact that we are in Capricorn season, which has really highlighted your integrity in how you navigate other people's money, other people's resources. So there's some interplay there between your own self-worth and other people's baggage or other people's money or shared resources. There's something in that. You really want to make sure, first of all, that you are holding yourself at a very high level of integrity in how you're managing or navigating other people's money or resources. So that will help alleviate any frustration that you might have around your own money or resources. And then there's also the element with Uranus moving through the 12th house that really suggests that over the past several years, there's been a lot of deep personal inner change, a lot of awakening to your own inner patterns, understanding yourself on a new level, understanding something on a spiritual or psychological level, and some sense of new big change in that area is really offering you an opportunity to, rather than get stuck in this frustration around your money or resources, put you in a mindset of, or I don't know if mindset is the right word, but in a position where you're really ready to take action. You're really ready to stand up for your own self-worth and what you are worth. Hmm,
Nice. Nice,
I
Lori.
like that. You're going to ask for a raise at work.
I like it. Yeah, I think I was thinking, you've done a great job covering all the pieces of what were offered here, and so all I'd say is just like in a nutshell, this is a very internal process for those of you Gemini rising. This is an internal process that deals with the way you value yourself, the way you handle other people's values and projections and so on onto you, and really understanding the impact of your subconscious processes and how, that's kind of the whole picture here. This is very internal, and a moment in time to possibly, just move something forwards that is supportive of you ultimately, that helps you move into a new place of growth and understanding about your own emotions. So that's the active part. The Mars active part is like take an action that supports your self-worth. So yeah, sign up for therapy.
Or, yeah, anyway, we'll move on.
Next.
Let's move on to folks who have Cancer rising.
Okay, so those of us with Cancer rising, this Cancer full moon is landing in the first house. Let's just touch base about the first house. It's the most powerful house in the whole thing because it's really the part that refers to the self. In ancient astrology, it's the self, and in modern astrology, it's the self and then your personal development and how you project yourself out into the world. So it's a very important house. So the Cancer full moon really illuminates who you are as a Cancer person. Your the sensitivity through which you walk around the world. The rising sign is what people tend to get hit with first. So this full moon is really illuminating that. And with Mars here, I mean, this could be difficult. Again, Mars presents the potential challenge of frustration because it's needs, wants to go outwards, but it's being directed inwards here. So, I mean, there's something about that. So ask yourself, is there something that you're feeling heated about or uncomfortable about or in earnest about that you need to deal with? And also recognize how galvanizing and helpful this can be too. It can really push you into taking an action that so far you have been unwilling to take. So that's kind of that's a little bit about the Moon Mars conjunction in the first house. Um, the backdrop of that, of course, is that it's a full moon, so we are in Capricorn season, and the sun is busy illuminating your partnerships, and all of the one-on-one encounters you have. And again, remember, business partnerships, personal partnerships, it runs the gamut. So that's where, I mean, I think with this one, there could be a lot of temptation to kind of project your feelings onto your partner, or take on their feelings as your own. And that would be the kind of the less healthy side. But if you know that that's the case, you can ask yourself those questions. And the good news about Mars is it can help you separate out that. It can help you separate like where you end and where your partners end. So there's something in that mix of partnerships that can be very helpful at this Cancer full moon. In the meantime, helpful about what? I mean, we've put Uranus on these charts. Uranus is in your 11th house of community. So that suggests a new doorway, a new opening in your groups. The 11th house is your community. It's also just groups in general. It could be professional groups. It can be, again, groups at work. It can be the people you go to yoga with or some other fitness class or whatever. So that's where there's an invitation to embrace the change that is fundamentally changing your identity and the way that you move through the world. And you just get a little glimpse of that at this Cancer full moon. It's just a moment in time to do something about whatever all those topics are I just brought up.
Yeah, I really like this one. I think about that. Uranus has been in your 11th house for quite a while now, and it's really waking you up to what community could be for you. What community is ready to welcome you? Or what community are you capable or ready to allow yourself to be welcomed into? And how can that understanding, that change in your view of community, how can that encourage you to take action to really show up in a new, more powerful way as far as your personality goes? I love that. And I love that for you specifically, Jenny.
Thanks, Lori.
That's awesome. Okay, we're going to
Cool.
move on to folks who have Leo rising. If you have Leo rising, you know, you step into the world and you've got that sunny Leo disposition, and you've got Cancer in the 12th house. So this full moon is happening in a very, very hidden area of your chart. The 12th house really speaks to our our internal processes that are not seen clearly on the surface. It's our internal psychological processes or understanding, or even our spiritual understanding. We're very sensitive in this area. Those of you with Leo rising, there's a lot of sensitivity here, and this is what's really being illuminated is your internal processes. With Mars there, you may have some, yeah, this feels like, and I think you said this when we were talking earlier, Jenny, feels like a pebble in your shoe. You know, there's something you might not even know where it's coming from because it's in such a hidden area, but there's some potential for real internal frustration. Um, you know, if you're feeling that at this Cancer full moon, first of all, we want to think about and consider the polarity. We're in Capricorn season, which is really highlighting your day-to-day routines, your how you care for yourself as a human being on this planet. And you know, you want to really think about how serious, how much are you taking responsibility for your day-to-day routines? How much in integrity are you in seriously caring for yourself? And that, for one thing, should help you deal with any frustration internally. But then we've also added Uranus here. And I want to really think about this because Uranus is in your 10th house. Over the last number of years, there's been a lot of activity in your 10th house, career, social reputation. There's been some big shifting movements there. And something in how you understand and see your career or social reputation is it's like that change is allowing you to understand your hidden processes more in a more positive way. And there's some invitation here coming from your career that can allow you to take action on some of these hidden processes. I feel like I'm kind of lost in the weeds of what I'm saying. I can see it, but I'm not sure that I'm articulating it. What do you see, Jenny?
Yeah. No, I think you definitely like you're painting the picture here. And I do always think the 12th house is tricky to
Yeah.
explain. We always feel that way. And I think you've said, I mean, really the idea of just like whatever awakening's happening through your profession, whether it's you responding to changes in the culture or
Mhm.
something that's changed in your career, it's helping you at this Cancer full moon open a new door. I think about that idea of there could be the 12th house can also be information coming in from other places. So I think about like, channeling information or information that just pops up and you're like, where the heck did this come from? And especially if you have important planets in the 12th house in Cancer, this is a great time to be like, whoa, not only is there information coming in, but it's information I can act on, like I can take an action on that's going to be part of my work. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because it's both directions,
Yeah,
right? It's like what's awakening in terms of your career social reputation is activating your ability and need to take action on this internal sensitivity, which then has the opportunity to further change and increase your social reputation or your career.
yeah.
Huh.
And with the sun in Capricorn too, that's also a place that refers to work. So it's something you're working on now during Capricorn season, as well as being the bigger picture of your whatever your
Right.
professional life is. So
Right. And of course, that Uranus is also trining the sun. So
yeah.
there's a big wake up coming from your career that's really going to help you activate some of your inner processes. I like that. Okay, let's move on. Folks who have Virgo rising.
Okay, for those of you with Virgo rising, this Cancer full moon is landing in your 11th house. The 11th house is a very social house. It's the one that refers to the bigger groups, so bigger groups in society, so community. I always think about, I mean, I go to yoga, so I'm always thinking about like going to yoga classes and being in these classes, these people that you don't really know, but maybe you've seen for a while and you know that they support you. Because that's the key thing about the 11th house. The key thing is how do your communities support you? Like how open are you to receiving that support? And I'm not talking about, it's kind of funny having Cancer here because I'm not talking about your best friend supporting you. I'm talking about, that bigger group of people. Like, I mean, if you're somebody who, let's say you're publishing a book. It's like the people who are reading your book, your fans. You may never know who some of those people are, but nonetheless, they're supporting you to do the thing you're supposed to do. And so at this Cancer full moon, you really have an opportunity to revisit the idea of how receptive are you to this support? Do you feel connected? Do you not feel connected? I think those would be important questions to ask. And with Mars there, another question will be, is there something annoying about some community you're in? And then what is that information? What is it telling you if there is an annoyance here? On the other hand, it could be pushing you to take an action to go ahead and sign up for that group thing that you've been kind of thinking about, but you're a little nervous to act on, and you've kind of been blowing it off. Well, this would be a moment to say, "Oh no, I'm doing that, and I need to do that for my emotional well-being. It's going to help me. It's going to support me." Um, this is also against the backdrop of, well, we're in Capricorn season. So for the last few weeks, the Capricorn sun has been shining a light in the opposite area of your life, which is the area that's concerned with how you give of yourself, some diligent way that you've been applying yourself to create structure, to be creative, to share your love with somebody, maybe to take some sort of risks. Those are all fifth house things. So that is part of this whole story. How does that play into this sensitive moment in time at the Cancer full moon about how you receive from other people? So that's the kind of full moon story. We've also included the planet Uranus in here because Uranus is telling a bigger, longer, slower story about the way you've been asked to wake up in a very public way. It's in the ninth house. The ninth house refers to your higher education. It could refer to like matters of legality and religion and also publishing. Those are all very ninth house thing. Ninth house also refers to astrology and other kind of philosophies of life. So there's something that you have been waking up for quite some time now. The culture has been waking you up, or you've been pushing your way into a new part of the culture. That's been going on for a long time. And so now to bring it back to the Cancer full moon, it's a moment in time to act on this. There's a moment, this is giving you an opportunity to act on your newly awakened world perspective in a way that is going to support you emotionally.
Hmm.
So yeah, what do you think?
Well, I feel very inspired.
Great.
I really do. I feel like I can feel that Uranus inspiring Mars, even though it's going, even though it's retrograde. It's like, oh, well, that's just part of the process. These planets go retrograde. They have to go internal and do some of the work before they can really drive it forward. But that doesn't mean you're not getting the gifts. You're not getting the what you need. And with that Uranus, sextiling that Mars and the moon, it really is, to me, it says, that your higher understanding, what you have woken up to in terms of higher understanding, whatever that means for an individual, that is really encouraging you to take the actions necessary to receive, allow yourself to receive from community. You cannot receive from community if there's no community, or if you're not putting something out there to receive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
how do you receive from community? Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
I
Well,
find this inspiring.
I mean, that's the co-creative process of the polarity, right? Like the sun is in the fifth house, and not only is the sun speaking about whatever you've done the last few weeks, but the sun is just illuminating all the work you've done,
Right.
the diligent hard work you've had to put in for a long time, so this makes a lot of sense,
Yeah,
from
Virgo rising with
yeah.
Capricorn in the fifth house. One of the things I always say about Capricorn in the fifth house is, the fifth house is also about play. How do people with Virgo rising play? They work. That's how they play. At any rate, there you have it. Let's go on to folks with Libra rising. So if you have Libra rising, this sensitive Cancer full moon is happening in your 10th house. The 10th house, of course, is the area of your life that relates to your career, your vocation, your social reputation. It is the most public house. So, anybody with Libra rising is very sensitive around their public reputation. And this full moon really highlights that sensitivity. And with Mars in the picture, Mars retrograde there in the picture, there may be a lot of frustration in how you are showing up in your career or social reputation. There's some frustration, there's some difficulty in this area right now. You want to thinking about the polarity, thinking about the sun for the last few weeks has been going through Capricorn in your fourth house, really highlighting your responsibility, your integrity as far as home and family goes. And these two really have to support each other here. In order to deal with and manage whatever frustration might be showing up in that public area, you need to really know that you are in integrity and taking responsibility around home and family. Now, the other part that we've added is Uranus. And Uranus, for some years now, has been going through your eighth house, really revamping and fundamentally changing your understanding of how you navigate other people's problems, other people's issues, all the stuff that can be difficult in our relationships with people. Not that the eighth house only brings up difficulties, but it really does, with Uranus in there, you've really been awakening to how to navigate other people's stuff. So that is at this period in time, that understanding that you've been waking up to is really offering you a new way to deal with frustration that's coming up socially. It's asking you, do you need to get stuck in this frustration, or can you turn it around and take action in some way? What is the action that you can take that's going to support what you've learned, that's going to allow you to move forward in some way from this moment of illumination? Hmm.
Yeah, this one interests me too because I think, one of Mars's jobs, according to astrology, is to help us separate. It has a severing capacity, so it can cut. So it kind of suggests, and then you have Uranus in the eighth house, which has a lot to do with boundaries. And I think what I'm wondering about is with this one is there's an interesting little storyline about what you might need to let go of or cut from to do with your career. That might be an action. It might not just be, moving forwards in some way. It might be that you need to actually sever it to some, maybe there's a responsibility you've been forced into in your job and you don't want to do that anymore, or maybe you need a new job. I don't know. But there's something about that. And with Uranus, as you said, like going through the eighth house doesn't have to be negative. It just can be some way that you're waking up to a boundary you need to set. So that was just something that popped in my head. I'm not saying that's what's happening for you, but it's interesting because of that. Mars can take action in a lot of different ways, and sometimes it's to leave and let go. Like
Yeah.
anyway.
I really
Um,
like that you brought that up. And I want to just add, you might not have a career. It might be solely about your reputation. What is it about your reputation that needs to be cut off? And this allows you to change the storyline that, for whatever reason, you've developed this reputation, but you're really changing. And this
yeah.
allows you to cut off from some of those other old assumptions. But
Yeah, and
I
because
like
this
that.
one also doesn't it just make such a good statement about you've got Capricorn in the fourth house, like your roots and your home life and your ability to be grounded and totally in integrity at the very roots of your being is so important for you. So the other things are, I don't know, that's just what it shows for me. So yeah.
And waking up to what your boundaries can be. Yeah, this
Yeah,
just makes me think of do you know who Mel Robbins is?
yeah, I do. Yeah. Does a lot of podcasts.
She just did this. She just wrote a book called Let Them.
Oh yeah. Okay.
For
I
some reason, that's what this
yeah.
reminds me of. It's like, I've had this messed up reputation. Well, I've been learning so much and now just let them. And that cuts me, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going off on something, but I love Mel Robbins and her let them idea. Anyway, going on to folks with Scorpio rising.
All right. So if you have Scorpio rising, the Cancer full moon is illuminating your ninth house. The ninth house is a fun house. It's one of the learning houses where you got to keep learning stuff. It's also one of the houses that has to do with your self-expression. It's where you gather these experiences in your life, and from that you formulate a philosophy, a life philosophy, and ultimately a worldview. So it can be your set of beliefs. Beliefs can be in the ninth house, but it also might be your education that is being highlighted right now because the Cancer full moon, again, it's just a moment in time. But this Cancer full moon is spotlighting that ninth house, that place where you take in information and then you go out in the world and you explore. I also want to say you can explore through books.
Mm.
But anyway, those are all ninth house things. So during this Cancer full moon, there's something being illuminated about your sensitivity here. There's something you feel strongly about that you either need to learn or you're trying to take in, or maybe there's a travel adventure. You're like, oh, I gotta go do this. With Mars right next to that full moon, it's really highlighting the strength of your passion or your feelings about something. And as
Mhm.
a Scorpio rising person, well, that's the sign of passion. So there's something that's really feeling, exciting or maybe infuriating that you feel like you have to do something about it. Those are things that the Mars Moon conjunction can bring up during this full moon. Um, Also, it is Capricorn season. So that means for those of you with Scorpio rising, the last few weeks, the focus has been on how you communicate, how you share what you learn, how you interact, possibly with neighbors. Lori, I love how you always talk about the third house as being those relationships you don't choose. So your siblings and your neighbors in this kind of local environment that you're in. So that's where the Capricorn sun has been kind of testing out your voice and encouraging you to speak up about some things. And now at this Cancer full moon, you feel this need to really act on whatever it is you've been working on. The other thing that we have included is Uranus. Uranus is a planet that symbolizes these enormous changes. Some of them come from within, but a lot of them come from without, the external changes in the culture and how they affect you. So
Mhm.
for you with Scorpio rising, that Uranus has been charging through your seventh house for a while now, which has been really stirring up the pot in terms of your partnerships. It might be something has gone on with your partner. It might be the way you handle your partnerships. It might be something in a business partnership that's come up. There's a number of ways that could present. But nonetheless, there's a lot of change. And now that change is showing you an opportunity for you to act on through the where the full moon is. So back to that kind of idea of acting on some experience you feel like you need to have. And the seventh house is helping you where Uranus is helping you understand what that action might be. For example, maybe you have a partner who is chomping at the bit to go to Africa and you've never thought you want to go to Africa. And all of a sudden you're like, actually, maybe I should just do that. So just a simple example. There's a lot of different things that could be, but that's just one way to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it that you brought up, the third house as the relationships we don't choose. And then the seventh house is the relationships that are contractual relationships. It's just kind of interesting that this one brings in both of those. I was just thinking about, yeah, some unusual changes in your own understanding of what relationship is for you or could be for you, really, offering this opportunity to um, kind of rather than be stuck in frustration around some worldview issue, to take some action. Maybe, I don't know, maybe your partner is encouraging you to get into politics. I don't know. Anyway,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
yeah. So there's many ways this can play out, but that's we kind of played with that. There we go. Let's go on to folks with Sagittarius rising. If you have Sagittarius rising, this full moon, this Cancer full moon, is happening in your eighth house. So, the eighth house is really a deep, intense area of the chart. I think of it kind of glibly on the surface. I talk about it as, it's other people's values. But you start thinking about that, how and where in our lives we have to navigate and manage and understand how other people believe, what they think, other people's values, where we bump into the baggage that other people carry. This is a very, very deep area of the chart. And for people with Sagittarius rising, this is an area that they are very, very sensitive to. It's the area where we learn that we need to set boundaries. It's through the eighth house that we set boundaries, that we develop an understanding of the need for ritual and boundaries. So this is a very sensitive area for you, and this is what's being highlighted. There may be some real frustration in this area in your life right now. Perhaps you realize that, someone you're in relationship with is running all over your boundaries and you feel frustrated and angry and all of that. There could be something around that that crops up during this time. We want to think about the fact that we are in Capricorn season. So, over these past weeks, there's been a lot of focus on the second house, the polarity here to the eighth house. So, you really want to make sure that you are in integrity and taking responsibility for your own values, your own self-worth, as the opposite to other people's um, baggage, your own baggage. Okay. So you want to make sure you're in high integrity and then pay attention if you're feeling this frustration around other people's baggage. And then you want to look at where Uranus is. We've added Uranus because it is in such a beautiful little opportunistic sextile to this full moon, suggesting that the big changes that have occurred over the past several years around the sixth house are really offering an opportunity. I think I twisted my words there, but at any rate, you've been through a lot of changes in understanding how to navigate your day-to-day routines. And because of that, there's something in the gifts that you've received through changing your day-to-day routines that's now allowing you to, offering you that opportunity to see your situation from a different light and be able to, rather than just sinking into frustration, really taking some constructive actions on setting those boundaries that you're seeing are necessary. I think that the frustration is you're seeing new boundaries that you need to set or old ones that you forgot, something along those lines.
Nice. Yeah, the other thing that just occurs to me as I'm looking at this is just you talking about the changes in routines that Uranus brings. And some of those could be because of health issues or changes. I mean, you might have had some health struggles possibly, or some habits you've had to change because they haven't been supporting your health and so on and so forth. And I think that this Cancer full moon is giving this little window into just what Laurie's saying, like maybe there's some exactly what you said, like the different boundaries you need to set that really are supporting and respecting your mental health,
Mhm.
and making sure that because I think many of us have had those experiences where you end up being in a relationship with people that aren't very good for you, one reason or another. And I think that this could show you, kind of bring that in, like, what's that about? Like, are you valuing yourself enough? The eighth house certainly has something to say about relationships too. And so that's the question. And again, it brings in that idea of, can Mars be helpful here in helping you cut your losses? Is there something you need to sever or separate from, which is what Mars also brings, that will support your health. And so although Uranus isn't always easy or pleasant, it still could be an opportunity to overall, create a more robust sense of self and sense of well-being and health.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, let's move on then to folks with Capricorn rising.
All right, so those of you at Capricorn rising, this Cancer full moon is shining a light into your seventh house. The seventh house, like for you with Capricorn rising, the seventh house is a very sensitive place. I mean, anywhere you have Cancer is a place that's associated with your very tender moon. So the seventh house is a tender area for you. And this Cancer full moon is, kind of shining a light in that. And you're like, yeah, tell me something I don't know. It's the Cancer full moon is, yeah, it's really giving you a little bit of a test. Like, how am I doing in this area? What's going on in my partnerships? And again, this can be your romantic partnerships, but this also is any one-on-one connection. So it can be people at work, business partners, things like that as well. So it's a really good opportunity to kind of look at, am I feeling reactive in whatever partnership you happen to be interacting with at this Cancer full moon? Like, am I feeling reactive? Am I feeling tender? Am I feeling frustrated? Or also, you might be feeling like, oh, I'm ready for an action. I'm ready to move towards something that so far I've kind of been maybe moving away from.
Mhm.
So it could be a time where you're kind of not sure about some relationship or other, and all of a sudden you're like, no, I think I'm ready to move further into it.
Mhm.
Or I'm ready to have it be over because it's not really working for me. So again, it's only a moment in time, so I don't want you to be hasty, but it is a really helpful time to kind of assess that. And meanwhile, with Capricorn season happening, that means the sun is very much shining a light into you as a human being, like how you have integrity as a human being, like the authority that you show up with. These are the things that are being highlighted, against the backdrop of this Cancer full moon. So this is an important time for that kind of self-examination. Meanwhile, we have also included Uranus in here. Uranus is the planet of, major change and awakenings, and it has been stirring up your fifth house for many years now, really stirring up how you give of yourself. So I think you can see pretty clearly how that might tie in with this relationship scenario. And what that Uranus is ultimately doing in this little picture, this window of time, is stirring you up in a way that's begging a question, like, hey, there's an opportunity here. How do you want to give of yourself? How do you want to give your love? Whether it's into a project, a person, a relationship, whatever it is, that's what the question is kind of, it's really illuminating that. But more than anything, it's showing you an opportunity for you to be able to take it this Cancer full moon.
It
Yeah.
it's so interesting because yeah, you can see how this could go different ways.
Yeah.
It's like you have learned a lot. You have really had a lot of awakening kind of energy around what love means.
Mhm.
And now this is an opportunity to put that to your relationships, put that understanding into your most serious relationships. So yeah, the whole cutting thing. Are you gonna cut and run or are you gonna dive in? There's a lot in that. And Uranus in that fifth house could also really speak to your creativity as well. Really awakening to some creative endeavor that may impact your relationships. There's a lot of different ways, but those are the basic themes. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Before I dig myself a hole with words, I'm going to move on to folks who have Aquarius rising. So if you have Aquarius rising, this sensitive Cancer full moon falls in your sixth house. You know, it's funny. The sixth house is an interesting house because it's really the house that speaks to how we function on a day-to-day level, how we take care of our bodies, how we feed ourselves, all the day-to-day routines that really make up what we would call our lifestyle. I think more and more of that sixth house as our lifestyle, how we live day to day. So there's a lot, folks with Aquarius rising have a lot of sensitivity around that. It really is important to them on an emotional level how they function on that day-to-day level. With Mars, so that's really what's being highlighted is that area. With Mars retrograde so tightly immersed in this process right now, there may be some frustration. You may feel like you have your lifestyle all figured out and but there's something in the way. Again, my mind goes back to the rock in your shoe, the pebble in your shoe. You could literally have something, an ache or a pain, and you can't do your daily routines or, something along those lines. There's something that is frustrating the smooth running of your day-to-day routines.
Mhm.
So think about that. Think about how that is being processed. And we are in Capricorn season. So Capricorn for you falls in your 12th house. This polarity between the 12th and the 6th house is very interesting because you can think of it as the 6th house being your day-to-day physical routines, how you care for your body. The 12th house is more how you care for your spirit or your mental state. There's those are you can think of the polarity that way. So during Capricorn season, there's been a focus of seriously taking responsibility for your mental state, maybe for your understanding of your spirituality. So think about how those are relating to each other, what kind of stress there is there, what kind of frustration there is with the day-to-day routines. And then we've added Uranus because Uranus is offering us this little jolt of excitement, this little jolt of possibility. Uranus, for a number of years now, has been moving through your fourth house. There's been a lot of change for you, a lot of kind of waking up to what is really important to you regarding your home, your family, your ancestral line. Some excitement in that area is really offering you an opportunity to find a more positive way of dealing with that pebble stuck in your shoe or whatever the frustration is in your daily routines. How that plays out, I don't know. Off the top of my head, usually I have all these little ideas that come to mind. I don't know. There's some excitement. Maybe it's related to a new place that you've moved to, um, yeah, a new home environment that is offering different possibilities for your day-to-day routines. It could be something like that, something new that you've learned about a family member that could support you or help you find a different way to do those day-to-day routines that could give a more positive twist to that frustration and turn it into action instead. Hmm.
Yeah, and I think, when we make these full moon videos, we're really talking again about this like one moment in time. And the onus at this moment in time is on that sixth house with the moon next to Mars. And it's interesting because with Mars there, Mars may suggest a habit or a routine or something about your work environment that you need to get rid of. Because Mars has that the capacity to sever and cut and remove. That's one of Mars's jobs, according to astrology. And so there's that piece to it, but also because Mars is retrograde, it adds a deeper layer that it may be something, it doesn't, isn't necessarily something you have to get rid of. It can also be something you need to add because there's an internal piece to it and there's internal action that you may need to take, according to that. But that's the question. What about your routines is not serving you? What might you need to add? That could be like, oh, I need to add this different food in. I'm not getting enough fiber. I mean, that's a very classic thing right now. It could be something like that. Or it could be like, I need to quit smoking. I mean, so you have to decide for you which of those in your life, what's going on, what has your attention, and if there's heated feelings, pay attention because they're giving you really good information. So I just want
Absolutely.
to add that because you covered everything else.
Awesome. Okay, let's go on then to folks who have Pisces rising.
Right. So those of you with Pisces rising, you have this Cancer full moon landing in your fifth house. Let's talk about the fifth house for a minute because the fifth house it's a pretty cool house. First of all, it's the house of self-expression. So it's very much an extension of you and your sense of self. It's a way that you really express yourself that you would do no matter what. It doesn't have anything to do with money or whatever. It's just that you want to express yourself this way. So for that reason, it's the house where you really give of yourself. And with the sign of Cancer in the fifth house, like, you have to be very tuned into how you want to give of yourself because that's a very sensitive, vulnerable part of you that you're kind of pouring yourself out, through that lens. So there's something that you want to really be mindful. And this Cancer full moon is really shining a light on part of that process. Like, so you're asking yourself questions like, am I giving of myself the way I want to? Am I being overly protective of my vulnerability and not giving of myself? Or am I struggling I'm just pouring out my love and there isn't really any good boundaries helping me here? I mean, those
Mhm.
are things that you're going to want to think about. The fifth house also refers to games, recreation, pleasure, or risk taking. So, I mean, really, it's once you get through that kind of emotional layer, this can be a place that can be a major source of joy. I mean, this would be the place that you really fill your cup. So, all of those are, I know that's a lot, but all of those are things that might be coming to light during this Cancer full moon. With Mars there's some heat added to the mix. The pot's on the boil. So you might be noticing something like frustration, aggravation, anger on one hand that Mars can suggest, or you might feel extremely motivated to take some sort of action and you want to do that now. So ask yourself, where do you fall on that spectrum? Do you feel a sort of an angsty sense here? Meanwhile, we are in Capricorn season. The sun has been in Capricorn for a few weeks. So that has been really shining a light in the opposite area of your life, which is up there in the 11th house, which is, how you hold your authority in groups and in your community. So that's been the kind of the backdrop, of these past few weeks. And then you're kind of having to answer this much more sensitive question about how you give of yourself, this more personal, sensitive question. And so that's kind of the story of the Cancer full moon. At this time, we also have a sextile from Uranus to the moon. So a sextile is a really nice aspect. It's an opportunity. Now you have to take that opportunity. And what the opportunity here is it has to do with a big change in your local environment or how you use your voice with other people. It could also be a change in your connection with a sibling or a neighbor. So those are all possibilities where Uranus is. And that opportunity is, I don't know, there's something that's being stirred up that is showing you a way that you may need to act on those feelings that the Cancer full moon represents. So this moment in time, this brief moment in time, is this sort of this hand being reached out to you, and it's like, and you
Mhm.
can decide whether or not you want to take that opportunity that has to do with the way you share yourself and the way you communicate about yourself.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think?
I like that. I really like thinking about Uranus sextiling the moon and Mars in the fifth house from the third. I really like that. It's like you really have, over the past several years or so, you've been really waking up to the power of your own voice. That's how I think of it here. The power of your own voice is really showing you how to take action in your creativity. And yes, Mars is retrograde and there's some frustration in it, but if that frustration is showing you on a deeply internal level what action you can take. You're not going to take action right this minute, but you're really seeing what it is that yeah, the creativity and your voice, bringing those two together. I love that. I just love that. So for those of you with Pisces, yeah, what is it? What is it in your voice that needs to be given a creative opening?
Yeah, I like that too. I like that how you drew those together more because it's very it's like a weaving,
Yeah,
the weaving of your voice into your creativity and how do you,
yeah,
it's really it adds a lot of pizzazz to how you present yourself.
yeah. I love that. That's great. Okay, well, I think we have done it. Once again, Jenny, we made it from Aries all the way through to Pisces. Amazing. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Lori. Thanks for
Thank
watching,
you,
everybody.
Jenny. Thank you so much. It was wonderful and goodbye.